Hello. Welcome to the ADHD Brains in Business Show, a place to talk about ADHD and to find out how our brains best work with it, and just to celebrate our ingenious, creative, phenomenal minds. So if you're on, say hello, give me a little like or something, and I hope I'm live in the group. So this week, I'm a bit nervous this week, so I'm doing this on my own this week because I wanted to take some time out to talk about women and ADHD. This week I was asked by a friend to go and speak at her mother's WI on their amendment, which is about helping raise awareness of ADHD in women and helping increase our chances of getting diagnosed. And I had to talk to them about it, and at the end they all had to vote, and I'm very pleased to say they did all vote for the amendment at the end. But for me, I was asked to kind of go along and speak, I think, because for me, what I see with ADHD and women with ADHD is just the amazing, phenomenal things that they achieve, women with ADHD. They have, well, like that's what this show is all about, really, is to highlight the fact that actually there is so much we can do and so much that can be achieved. And there is a stigma attached to ADHD, unfortunately, still. I think that's changing. And I think, I hear now, well, how come everyone's suddenly got ADHD? In fact, the things that I hear is, how come suddenly everyone's got ADHD? And, oh, yeah, I don't want that label. And I think that can be quite damaging. And one of the reasons why so many women are not getting diagnosed or not getting diagnosed till later. And what I see is the problems that can cause in their lives. So actually, at the moment, this is a gender equality issue, because if you're a boy or a man, you're 4 times more likely to be diagnosed than a woman or a girl in school. And so that has a huge effect on the chances girls have in terms of getting support, understanding themselves, being able to implement strategies that work for their brains rather than for the brains that created the education system, but that's a whole nother thing. So basically, I am coming across lots of ladies that are getting or realizing that ADHD could be the thing in their life that is has caused them for a long time to feel like they don't quite fit in. So ADHD was one of the reasons that kind of ADHD is all over the place and people are suddenly hearing more and more about it, and it seems like everybody's getting diagnosed, is that until 1990, ADHD wasn't really even recognized as something that girls could experience. It was really thought of as something that children had, and that it was only in childhood, and that it was predominantly in boys, and it was something that wasn't even taken into adulthood. So that's changed. So that awareness has changed, and along with that awareness has come more social media, more talking about it, and the penny is dropping for a lot more women. Now, the research is still mostly done on men and boys, and a lot of research, most of the mainstream research out there, says there isn't a difference in ADHD between men and women, and that it presents the same. And actually, although it might have some of the same traits, it can show up in a really different way, because men and women are different. Our brains are different, our physiology is different, we have different hormones. So of course it's going to show differently. And in my experience, and the women that I've been working with, and including my own experiences, I don't present in many of the stereotypical ways. And I think what's also growing is the understanding around ADHD, what it is, and how it presents. I'm just going to see if I'm live in the group, because I don't think I am again. Let's have a look. And so, someone ADHD, what it is. That's me. I'll shut myself up. So, like I say, so scientific research really says there's no real difference, but actually day-to-day life, I think there's lots and lots of differences. So there's 3 types of ADHD, three main types, and we've got hyperactive. So all ADHD is now comes under the umbrella of being ADHD. There's no ADHD or ADD. And so we have hyperactive, predominantly hyperactive ADHD. These people they may talk excessively, they may move constantly, they may fidget, they can be very high energy, they might interrupt, they might struggle with self-control, they might be more impulsive. This tends to be more diagnosed in men and children than in women, which, well, I'll come to that in a minute. Then we've got predominantly inattentive ADHD. And this is where maybe they're more often easily distracted. They can make careless mistakes. They can struggle with deadlines. They can struggle with motivation. They lose things a lot. They can appear uninterested. And this is generally more common in women, in females. And then we've got the combined type, which is, I think you have to have 6 or 7 traits from either one. So I'm combined type, and I think quite a lot of people are. But if we look at the different types of ADHD and the commonalities of, like, the mostly males, or it tends to be high proportion of males that have the hyperactive type, higher proportion with the inattentive type, we can see why it may well be that boys have traditionally and historically been diagnosed when women haven't, because the hyperactive type is more noticeable, it's more out there, it's more visible, and it's easier to pick up on. So, in the classroom, the hyperactive type of ADHD might be the child that fidgets, that calls out, that's a bit more challenging for the teacher, so gets more attention, gets noticed more. Whereas the child with inattentive ADHD, so let's just say more than likely to be a girl, maybe sitting at the back of the class, maybe quiet, maybe shyer, maybe doesn't interact as much, maybe they're more daydreamy. These children generally tend to be less trouble. So they get noticed less and they can fly under the radar a lot more. So we can see why actually, those that are more impulsive, more noisy, more out there are going to get picked up first. Historically, we can see why that has happened. I think nowadays there's no excuse for it, because I think the training needs to be there on what ADHD really is and how it presents, so that it can be picked up more early. Because if you look at the naughty boy stereotypical ADHD child, he gets diagnosed, he gets help at school, he gets support in his exams, he gets understanding. He can learn the right strategies. He may be able to use medication. It might work well for him. There's all these opportunities that will come from that boy getting diagnosed, compared to a girl in the class with inattentive ADHD who sits quietly at the back of the class and just kind of sails through, doing average. Having said that, a lot of girls with ADHD are very intelligent and they are really high achievers. And so for some of them, it's quite boring doing the work as well. But for those people, they're quieter, they're less trouble. So actually, they don't get the diagnosis. So although they are struggling with their exams, although they're struggling to study, struggling with forgetting things and being disorganized, they're not getting the help. And quite often what they're getting is labels of being a bit forgetful, being lazy, being shy, quiet, all of these sorts of things. So that's the first thing. And I think, like I say, historically, I look at that story and I see myself, and I just think, and I wasn't the quiet girl at the back of the room. I was the impulsive, noisy pain in the butt in the classroom. And that's something I actually carry quite a bit of shame about, that I was that person. And I was repeatedly told, Kim, we want to put you in the higher level. We want to put you in the next band, in the top band, but we can't put you in there because you're too disruptive. And I knew that was true. I knew that it wasn't the right place for me to go because I didn't deserve to be there. And yet, had somebody gone, oh, hold on a minute, what if this is ADHD? Then it could have been very different because I would have had some help. I'd have had some support and understanding and had a chance to learn strategies that would help me control my behavior a bit more. And then I look at my daughter, who presents very differently to me and who was very much the quiet girl at the back of the room. There was no trouble whatsoever. And so didn't get any of the extra help or any of the stuff. Hello, Mel. Me too. Naughty girl in my teens. I bet you were. So that's kind of like how we can set out, and we can see why maybe there are those differences. With the hyperactive type, it's a lot more visible. With the inattentive type, it's far more of an inside job. With a lot of that hyperactive energy can be turned inwards. So for these men and women, it can be overthinking. It can be getting overwhelmed. It just can be this excess energy within ourselves that leads to all sorts of, and can quite often be misdiagnosed as anxiety. So that isn't to say, it isn't to say that ADHD isn't challenging for each gender. It's not more challenging for one gender than the other. It's not, there's so many traits to it. However, it is different. And so we need to recognize that it does present differently, which makes perfect sense. Female brains are different to male brains. Female brains, all brains start life in utero as female. And at 8 weeks, they either get a surge of testosterone that turns them into a male brain and really lights up and gets more cells in the sex and the aggression centers, or it stays a female brain, in which case there are less cells in there and there are more cells in the communication and emotional centers, which is why girls often talk more before boys. Baby girls come out and study faces straight away. And within 3 months, they have done 400 times more. They're more adept at studying faces than their male counterparts, which look more at things. They study objects more. So women learn from a very early age to read faces, to read emotions, to learn how to fit in, to understand what people are saying when maybe, not just in language. And that's what makes women so intuitive. That's what makes us, if you think you probably know, because we're so observant and we're so good at picking up on how other people are feeling and behaving, which means that we can really easily help ourselves to fit into that, which again is why girls mature so much quicker than boys. So we've got that to start with. We're born with more emotional brains. That's our purpose. For Mother Nature wants us to communicate well and nurture and understand how people are reacting. So we've got that. The other thing we've got is our hormones that fluctuate throughout our life, 3 main times, particularly during puberty, after childbirth, and in menopause. And estrogen is a cognitive hormone. It plays a huge role in our cognitive function, which is why when we go into menopause, we struggle with brain fog, forgetting things, misplacing things, all of these sorts of things, because as estrogen ebbs, it affects our cognitive functioning. So if you've already got undiagnosed or diagnosed ADHD, these times in your life can be times when your symptoms really, really can flare up. And that's exactly what happened to me. If I look back now and I think, wow, if I go back to my early 40s, that's when things started to, so far, menopause for me has been a very cognitive experience. I've not had anything physically, but the memory, the forgetfulness, and just the impulsiveness in terms of not being able to concentrate, struggling to stay focused with stuff like that. So we have these times in our life. We also have these times within our monthly cycle. because we have times in our month where we've got all these hormones that really help us to with our executive functioning, with getting things done, with getting out in society. And as they ebb away, you know, we can struggle with PMT, which has been shown, PMDD, you know, has been shown to be more common and prevalent in women with ADHD, has as postnatal depression, has as more problems within within menopause. So, you know, we have to understand that it's different and understand why. And what happens with a lot of the women that I am now getting to know and working with, and is that actually what happens is, the other part of this actually that I haven't mentioned is what society expects of women, the gender, you know, the whole gender roles and the expectations. And so what happens is, you know, to run a house and to run a business or do well at work and have good relationships and have good marriages and partnerships and be a good mother, be a good daughter, all of these things is kind of what's expected. And so for women with ADHD to keep this, and they struggle to stay organized and keep up with their lives. But what we're really good at doing is masking. What we're really good at doing, and will have been doing all our lives, is looking at our neurotypical peers and seeing how they navigate the world and how they fit into the world, because that's what we do. We pick signals up from people, but then we hold ourselves to their standards. And it's not that we can't achieve just as much, but it's just that actually our brains work slightly differently. So what we're seeing our neurotypical peers and friends and colleagues doing, and holding ourselves to those standards, isn't even often really fair. And what this can actually lead to is feelings of inadequacy, feeling less than, and just never really feeling enough. And that's something I see a lot in women with ADHD, never feeling like they do have or are enough. There's always this something in there for more. And I look back, and one of my clients who didn't have ADHD at the time, or wasn't diagnosed with ADHD at the time, and she came to me and she said, "Oh yeah, I've done really well this week. I've done so and so." I can't remember what the thing she had done was. So now I'm going to go. And I remember saying to her, "Well, can't we just enjoy and embed this habit and sit here a minute?" And she was like, and the thought of her just settling for this being enough right now was really, really difficult, because we have this amazing, phenomenal drive, which takes us to amazing, phenomenal places and allows us to run business and do all these great things. But actually, quite often inside, we are really beating ourselves up. And very often with women, a lot of ADHD symptoms get diagnosed as personality traits. Oh, she's really scatty, or she's quite an anxious person, or she's quite an emotional person. And actually, we then take that on board, that that's how we are, something else to dig into ourselves and beat ourselves up with. And that leads to the feelings that a lot of women with ADHD carry, which is shame. I have really bad PMT and a really bad menopause too. Yeah. And it's very common. So let's look. Actually, I'm just going to get this up because I want to get this list for you now. I'm going to give you a list now. It's a bit boring, but I want to give you some of the things, some of the traits of ADHD in women that sometimes, you know, people would never put down to being ADHD. So see if any of these sort of resonate with you or people you know. So overly emotional, struggling to control emotions. Maybe that's, teary. Maybe that is flying off the handle. That was me. Daydreaming. They're very driven. You won't be all of these. Easily distracted, forgetful, struggle with high energy, struggle with low energy. A lot of women with ADHD burn out a lot because we're so driven. It's like we're on the go all the time, spinning all of those plates. I certainly know that that's something that I have. Highly sensitive, hyper focused. They can be overly talkative. They can blurt out or interrupt. They can appear careless or scatty. Creative. I've said that one. They can have trouble listening, unmotivated. They're very resourceful. I'll quote my daughter on this when she got diagnosed, and the psychologist said to her, you know, people with ADHD are usually really good at doing the big things, but they just struggle with the little things. And my daughter turned around and said, do you know what? I've always thought that, like, if there was a zombie apocalypse, I would know exactly what to do. I could save us all, but I wouldn't be able to find my keys. And I think that's quite a good description of how it can be. They can have trouble meeting deadlines. That can leave them feeling with low self-esteem. They can be very high achieving. They set huge standards in it for themselves. They can do anything they can to avoid anything they find boring or tedious, which makes like bill paying difficult. They sometimes get caught up with that. They can struggle to complete tasks, and they can be physically and mentally, verbally impulsive. There's loads of others, but that's just kind of like a list that covers some of the stuff that I've come across. There's also rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is very common in women, particularly with ADHD. And this is the crippling pain, fear, sometimes even physical pain of being rejected or judged or criticized. And in order to cover this up and in order to avoid this feeling, many women who struggle with this become huge perfectionists, massive people pleasers, so that they can do anything so that they're not going to be rejected or be criticized. But these women, and many women with ADHD, because we have these super fast brains, we see a lot. And because we see a lot, we feel a lot and we know a lot. And so actually, quite often these people can pick up on even the smallest thing, like a slightly raised eyebrow or a funny look, and be absolutely mortified. They can also hang on to things, hurts, conversations, situations for years and years, going ruminating over and over and over them and just not being able to let them go. The other thing is the overthinking and the overanalyzing. ADHDers are big thinkers. They're creative. They find solutions. They're inventive. They can create stories. Brilliant when it's positive. When they're on their own, maybe ruminating or dissecting something or going over themselves or analysing their own performance and how they turned up for that particular event, show or conversation, that same creativity can take them down a really dark path, which leads to, you know, self-berating themselves, never feeling good enough, and shame. The other thing is the organisation. They can seem distant. I was going to say something else that I've forgotten. They can forget things, particularly if perimenopausal too. If you are on, ladies, let me know if this is resonating with you in any way, or anyone you know, if it's something that you've thought of. One of the things that I said at the beginning, and I do hear a lot, and I hear it a lot, and I totally understand it, because it was something that I have said for years, is that about the label of ADHD, not wanting that label. And I think quite sometimes that can stop women being able to move forward and find solutions, and acceptance for some of the parts of them that they know might be a bit different, and they might know that they're a bit more sensitive, and they might sometimes wonder why they behave like they do when they've set the best of intentions. You know, I know for myself, I set myself goals, and sometimes I put so much pressure on myself, and sometimes I don't reach those goals, and that can be disappointing. And then that's just, in fact, I'm not like this now. So this is how getting diagnosed, which I wasn't going to do. I didn't think I needed to do. I knew I had ADHD. I knew what it was. I knew how it showed up in my life, and I knew that I did a lot of the things that helped me manage it, which is exercise, meditate, eat well, look after myself, get sleep, all of those sorts of things. But actually, for me, what a diagnosis has done is opened up even more awareness of where it shows up in my life. And I do that now without judgment. And I do that I do that more as oh, right, there it is again. That's a little bit ADHD. How can I do that better? Or is that something that maybe, you know, I'm very aware now of where my strengths lie and where my weaknesses lie. I'm not afraid to ask for help. I'm not afraid to say no to things. I know that I can get overwhelmed in certain situations. For my daughter, who used to get very overwhelmed in social situations, she's now able to navigate that differently. And for her, particularly, a diagnosis has changed her life. And so actually, you know, the diagnosis, whether it's yourself, whether it's through having a formal diagnosis, can actually really relieve the burden and give you a chance of self-acceptance and better understanding. And I think that a lot of women hold back from diagnosis, and I understand why. But those women that I know that have done it, it's like something's lifted off of them. It's a better understanding of themselves. The other thing is diagnosis. If you go official diagnosis, not only does it give you the chance for some self-acceptance and a chance of actually, you know, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not lazy, I'm not stupid, this is why. What it also gives them is the opportunity to maybe try medication if they want to, or get help through work. You can get a grant to help you with coaching and within your business. So it does open a lot of things up for you. And in my experience, because of the circles I'm moving, you know, I work with high flying women. I work with really successful women who have got 6-7+ figure businesses, who run teams, who these women are, well, I'm not working with a doctor at the moment, but I've worked with, these are doctors, they're lawyers, they're people that are doing phenomenal things, people that you are looking at all the time thinking, wow, they're phenomenal. How do they do that? Some of them, when they find that thing, actually they understand that they were driven so much because they never felt enough. So they would, I've met women that have got numerous qualifications where they had to just keep trying to prove, trying to be enough. But the other side of this, you know, I'm not really talking about the good stuff about ADHD. So let's talk about that for a minute. You know, these women, they take risks, they get stuff done, they can be hyper focused, they're creative, they're great at organizing, they are women who are empowering and have amazing opportunities. However, there are also women in prisons, undiagnosed ADHD, full of everywhere. And there's, like I said, there's not much research done on that either, because most research is done on men. But one small study I found was 69 women, I think it was, were screened for ADHD. They were all in prison. They'd all done various things, and they were all screened for ADHD. And out of 69 women, I think it's 69, 43 were shown to have ADHD. So what we have to think is, when we're worrying about labels and when we're letting this go, is that actually in those prisons are some phenomenal, think of the talent and the creativity and the ingenious energies that are sat in those prisons. Because do you know what? There, but for the grace of God. I look back over my teenage years and my younger years, and I did some really stupid, impulsive things. And I always knew that I was a bit more impulsive than my friends. I think my friends would very much say I was a bit of a loose cannon at times. And so there, but for the grace of God, really. And so we need to be raising this awareness. So I'm really, I was quite emotional talking to the WI. It's not my usual crowd. But to see that they listened and that the WI were going to take this on as a concern and to try and raise awareness, because the more we do, I think what we're going to see coming on, and I was talking to Laura Kirby on the show about this last week, is there will be more women who are going to be diagnosed with ADHD because we're more aware of it. So I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please put them in the chat if you haven't done. Let me know if you're catching up on replay. And I'll be back with you next week, where we'll be speaking to one of my, to Tina, who has recently trained to become an ADHD coach. She's also one of my clients. And so we'll be sharing the show with her next week. Thank you for tuning in. And thank you for the lady that said that's so informative. Peace out.